Sometime late last year, I sustained what will likely be a permanent injury to my scapula. As a consequence of this, I made an effort to go to various physical therapists in an attempt to lessen the pain and discomfort. I did not manage to find anyone who was especially good, but one gentleman in particular stuck out. He was a trained athlete who was engaged in many different types of sports, cycling, triathlon, weightlifting, to name a few, and upon encountering me, as a physical therapist, I should remind you, he experienced some non-trivial shock when I told him that the only sport I had done was resistance training and light cardio. Of course, I would argue that that's more than the average person does, but nonetheless, I was there because I was looking for help in improving my condition. But he continually expressed his astonishment that this was the only form of exercise that I had participated in. Most of the subsequent treatment was derailed because of this approach and his incredulity. From my end, I didn't have the feeling that I was in good hands. One could say that he and I had come from two different worlds. In another, albeit different situation, I encountered a marijuana enthusiast who was discussing the many benefits of consuming marijuana, both medically and otherwise. When I interjected that much or even most of what he was saying may be true, but that I was skeptical of the claim that marijuana had the universal utility he claimed it did, he became very hostile. I cited the fact that we all have different bodies and brains and that we all interact with chemicals differently. So a universal prescription of marijuana in the way he was going about it would likely fall short of the results he claimed it would achieve. I was replied to with both scoffing and anger on his part, and I stated rather simply that because he had seen some great benefit, that does not imply that everyone would, at which point I parted from the conversation. Again, we started from two separate points of origin. And most of you have probably encountered that one person who, upon achieving weight loss or fitness success on a particular diet, goes on to become the high acolyte of said diet, preaching and spreading the gospel to the far corners of the earth, with the only issue to be encountered being that someone else, somewhere in the world, has had similar or greater success with some other diet and operates in exactly the same way, where any opposition to the position of that diet in the hierarchy of diets is to be viewed as heresy. I could, of course, go on, but I don't think I need to. All the examples cited are prototypical examples of not just conflicting views, world or otherwise, but conflicting starting points in how we approach the world, broken down, of course, into the minutiae that we tend to become preoccupied with. And this is due largely to a problem I dub the problem of self-extrapolation. We do universally tend to self-extrapolate, and by that I mean we draw upon a highly personalized experience and account as to how we relate to the world. If you recall, I made a video some time back on issues concerning relatability and the many obstacles that stand in our way when we try to relate. And I should say, in light of that, if there's ever been an obstacle that would interfere with relatability, it would have to be the problem of self-extrapolation, or the starting point on how we begin to view the world. That we begin with our own perspective exclusively based upon our own life experience and our more often than not poor interpretation of data is not surprising in the least. After all, it is a byproduct of being the apes that we are. Most of our existence as Homo sapiens had been spent in small, tightly knit hunter-gatherer units in which there was a common thread to existence, and more importantly, a common universally relatable experience within the context of the tribe. Experiences outside of those common to the tribe were almost unheard of. Add to that the extremely likely genetic and cultural proximity of the individuals who comprise such tribes, and you get a recipe for near-instant relatability and easy communication. And this is, of course, simplified that there wasn't that much to talk about in the first place, given the requirements for survival, among other things. If we were to fast forward some 50,000 years later, we find ourselves in a very different situation, both as groups and as individuals. Nothing is a given. This is doubly true of the Internet era. In a world where we are digitally connected across vast distances that would have been unimaginable to any of our ancestors, the assumptions we make and the process of self-extrapolation that we typically engage in have become one of the great quagmires of our time. Indeed, it is no exaggeration to suggest that our world-self interface is more often than not maladaptive to both understanding the world and more broadly fruitful human communication. The problem that arises from self-extrapolation is the inevitable conflict that ensues when assumptions we make about the world become non-transferable and therefore inapplicable to other people and situations outside of our own experience, trapping us in our own limited experiential realm. The other people we are interfacing with do the same, and we are subsequently left up the creek without a paddle. This all may not seem like such a big deal, and to many I suspect it might not be, but the reality is that this limitation is extremely pernicious as it renders effective communication a virtual impossibility. And add to this the fact that people have the tendency to wed their ideas and experiences to their egos and identities, a topic to be explored in greater depth at a later date, and you have the perfect formula for communicative failure. When people of completely different life backgrounds encounter each other, something that only rarely would have occurred in prehistory, then the worst possible thing one can do is to enter the discussion extrapolating from one's own experiences. Even more so when those experiences are not shared at all, as would be the case perhaps with someone who grew up on a rural farm in a very religious community versus somebody who grew up in a secular environment in a highly urbanized area. Whatever commonalities might exist, they will not be related to in terms of immediate life circumstances, and beyond that, there will be all manner of life experiences that are highly distinct simply as a consequence of such disparate settings. And there are two salient points to be made here. One relating to why it is important to do our best to work past this, and another one relating to how we work past this. If it is not obvious, it very likely should be that the starting and ending point of every meaningful human interaction is conversation, because it is the only tool we have at our disposal to conduct human affairs. Its precursor, whatever you might want to call it, and I don't have a good name, maybe grunting, whatever primitive form it may take on, is insufficient. And when conversation breaks down, all that remains is violent conflict. Therefore, conversation and communication are absolutely essential. Now, for the record, I'm not claiming that all conversations are equally important. A dude bro spouting on about a party that he got drunk at the previous night is not what I would qualify as a terribly important conversation. But any time somebody attempts to tackle a topic in which both parties are invested, the stakes are raised. And the topic can be virtually anything: marijuana, nutrition, sports injuries, politics, you name it. This is the point where both participants view the topic as substantial enough to spend time on it, with the implication, provided no trolling is involved, that both are more invested in it than they otherwise would be in something else. One must also question the purpose of the conversation, as too many are had for the sake of ego, which is the main thrust of my argument. When you extrapolate solely from yourself, and do not attempt to take in different perspectives or views, or even make an effort to inquire after the other person's background and worldview, then it is very likely you're simply seeking reaffirmation of what you already believed or understood to be true in the first place. This, of course, begs the question of how many people are actually interested in honest, mutually profitable conversation. But that is neither here nor there. Whether we do it actively or passively, we must understand the world. And communication and conversation is the best way of going about it. The how question is simple in principle, but difficult in execution. We must stop assuming that our personal biases and circumstances are as applicable to others as they are to us, or that our views are universally held. It's a sort of acting in bad faith on a subconscious level. To be fair, I've been guilty of it on several occasions myself. After all, I'm just human. And in a world as increasingly complex as our own, it leads to nowhere good, I think. And I will acknowledge the difficulty in mitigating what is a very natural process for all of us, this problem of self-extrapolation. However, it strikes me as absolutely necessary in any circumstance where real information, conversation, indeed cooperation, are at stake. Given the extreme polarization of the current year, this holds doubly true. And I will admit that we will never be able to overcome this problem entirely, as that would be beyond our scope as human beings. But that does not mitigate the importance of attempting to do so, as some is usually better than none. Thank you very much for watching. As this channel operates off of the generosity and contributions of its subscribers, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Any and all support is more than appreciated. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.